Joining us right now is Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. And Mr. Secretary, thanks for being here. This is a big week, and there are lots of questions going around all of this. I think the first question would be, how quickly does this money go out, and where does it go?
So some of it moves out quite quickly because these dollars scale up things that already exist, like the formula programs that help the states build out their highway and road infrastructure. Other things, we're going to have to set up whole new programs. When you talk about how we're going to get those EV chargers out there, for example, or the program to reconnect some of the communities that were divided by transportation choices in the past. That'll take a little longer because we have to make sure that we've stood up the right kind of programming so that the dollars are spent well, so that it's accountable, so that we get the absolute most bang for that taxpayer buck. Let me tell you, our department is already gearing up. We've set up ways to make sure that we are tracking and tracing where those dollars go. We're going to have to hire new people to make sure that we're ready, and we are so excited. I mean, all year we have been preparing for the opportunity to really make these transformative investments in the roads and bridges, the ports and airports, the rail and transit of this country. Now we get the opportunity and, of course, the responsibility to actually do it and do it well.
Yeah, the supply chain has been stretched so thin, and part of that is this old infrastructure, things that haven't been updated. But that's not the only part of the problem. It's also a huge amount of demand. And I guess the question becomes, how quickly can that money fix things? And just by impact of that money being spent and bringing in more supplies to try and fix some of those things, does it stretch the supply chain even thinner in the short term before we can get to that?
So I think we got to be really smart about the distinction between long-term and short-term action. For the short term, you have things like what the president announced in that port action plan, seeing sweeper ships going around to pick up empty containers, this idea of pop-up container yards in Georgia so that if the containers are piling up at the port itself, just get them inland and sort them out there, clearing up the space so that you're less likely to see a backlog where the berthing is for the ships. Those are the kinds of things that can make an immediate difference. When you get to the medium-long run, that's where these long-term infrastructure benefits are going to make a difference. Look, some things are going to take a while to deliver. But also, if you look at what most economists think, yes, of course, we're creating jobs, we're creating demand with these investments. They're spread out in a way that, by design, the economy should be able to absorb.
You know, I've heard some complaints from different sectors as we've kind of covered the supply chain issue and things that are there. And there are truckers, independent truckers, who say, wait a second, how come we have to use the dispatch at the ports that are there, and that cost us 15% out of us, and there are new rules that have been put in place for how long we can drive, and if you ease some of those things, we might be more interested in going back. As you watch prices of gasoline go back, they point to those things too. Can you deal with any of those issues to try and make sure that the lack of truckers in places, that kind of is not as big of a problem?
Yeah, you know, among all of the different pinch points and all of the different players across the system, I think the truckers are making some of the most compelling points. It has to do with their compensation. It has to do with, frankly, the way their time is used, or sometimes the way their time is wasted when they're coming onto these ports, sometimes waiting hours for a chance to pick up a container. And, you know, given that we're already stretched in terms of labor supply, we need to make the absolute best of the truckers we do have, while also creating the working conditions so that we no longer see the turnover rates that we're seeing, and so that as we work in my department, for example, to help get more CDLs, more commercial driver's licenses issued, that the people who get them actually want to stay in that profession. I think we should continue looking at more ways to be helpful. Our head of FMCSA, our agency responsible for trucking within my department, has been doing a lot of engagement on this, and I do think there is more we can do. Never compromising safety, of course, but still a lot that we can do.
Mr. Secretary, we just saw inflation hit a 30-year high. This new bill is going to put a lot of additional money and spending, fiscal spending, into the economy. Are you worried about doing that at a time when the inflation picture is already so swollen? Do you worry that that will make inflation even worse?
Well, I think there's a reason why you see so many economists talking about how these bills will ease inflation, especially when you look at the Build Back Better bill, part 2 of what I like to call the big deal, the Biden-Harris economic agenda, because that really helps you get more people into the workforce. Look, our labor participation rates in this country are a real issue, and you know, it's not hard to look at the difference with countries that do a better job of, for example, helping people get child care. We know that the availability and affordability of child care, one of the things that's keeping people out of labor markets right now, and we've got to act on that for the long term. In the nearer term, again, remember that this program, this is, in terms of the infrastructure bill, very different from 2009, right? That was at a time when you had demand in free fall. Unemployment was the biggest concern by far, and there was all that talk about shovel-ready projects. We're really interested now in shovel-worthy projects, and this is spread out in such a way that, yes, some of these grant programs you'll be seeing a difference immediately, but this is really about making sure all of the 2020s play out in terms of our infrastructure in a way that's going to make America succeed for the rest of the century.